Hey everyone, so what I wanted to cover today was data safety when it comes to using AI tools. It's a huge topic. It's a big scare for a lot of people. They won't use the AI tools, and companies won't even use the AI tools because they're scared of data privacy issues and confidentiality issues. So with that all being said, I want to cover some different tips and tricks and things that you can do either as an individual or as a small business to watch out for these things and prepare for these things and make sure that you're going about using AI tools the right way. So let me move myself a little bit up here. Let me hide this. Let's jump into it. So what I wanted to cover is how to prompt properly using anonymization, generalization, synthesizing, touching on safety within the tools themselves. Some tools have more protections than other tools do. And then lastly, just some best practice tips that I would like to cover. So the biggest thing, why data safety? The big reason is so you don't get sued. It really comes down to how you're using the data that you have. If you are somebody that, let me just preface this with what data is. Data is any information that you have on a client, on yourself. Like for example, all my leads I have, that's all data. Anything if you go to like download your LinkedIn analytics of like how many likes you get per post, that's all data that you can utilize. So having some personal data on individuals like your clients and stuff like that, you need to be making sure that if you're going to be using any of it to any extent, that there's some procedures in place to keep everything safe and to keep yourself safe and keep your clients safe as well. So especially with new AI tools nowadays, you need to be making sure that you're using them properly. So that's why we're going to talk about prompting properly to start off. One thing I always like to emphasize is that when it comes to how you can use these tools, you need to be making sure that you're using only public facing information if you can. So keeping everything streamlined and keeping everything simple. To explain this, it's just anything out there that is already like public knowledge, that's like fair game to use. Anything that's not public knowledge that might like be behind closed doors, there can be some issues there. And that's why I recommend to not use information if you can. If you can avoid it, don't do it. Anyways, so with that being said, let's cover some different ways to anonymize identifying data. So when I say identifying data, this is any information that is one that can either link back to an individual, but two, it's also anything that's likely going to be private data to some extent. So there's a couple different ways that I'm going to walk through, with the first one being synthesizing, which is just replacing information with fake or similar data. So actually, let's go through the example because it just looking at this makes no sense. I know I got a little sentence on there, but the example would be, all right, let's take myself, Hank Barker, 23 years old. And what you want to do is you'd want to change that into something that's more like John Doe, young adult. Now, the reason you're doing this is because now there's no way that it can link, let's say you're having it help you write a document for me. Instead of saying, Hank Barker, my client, Hank Barker, 23 years old, you would say, hey, John Doe, a young adult client with these characteristics, let's say like blonde hair, blue eyes, entrepreneur, like you wouldn't have to, you could include all those things, but it's not linking to an individual. It's linking to just like a kind of like an archetype. This is what this person is. So what you're doing is like, let's say going back to that example, you would not be inputting Hank Barker, 23-year-old, you'd be inputting John Doe, young adult. Now, this gives the AI enough information about who the client is or who you're working with without having to like identify them exactly. Oh, this is Hank Barker, the 23-year-old who lives in Michigan. We're gonna go through some examples as well. This is just a super simple example, but what this is all doing, it's all just trying to anonymize things and make sure that there's nothing getting out there. You're not identifying somebody who doesn't want to be identified. Now, the next big one is masking. Now, this is omitting pieces of data. So when it comes to using this, what it looks like is taking numbers, names, anything like that, and masking them, like basically just putting the mask over so you can only see parts of them, but you can't identify the full thing. So the example here is Mark Zuckerberg. Instead of being Mark Zuckerberg, it's MZ with some asterisks afterwards. So you know who it is and you know how this, like what this applies to, but the AI tool doesn't, so that it's not going to be able to train on, okay, Mark Zuckerberg with his personal identifiable information out there. Maybe you're his doctor wanting to use AI and you're inputting things. Now it's not getting trained on so that people know all of Mark Zuckerberg's personal medical history. It's keeping everything safe. Now, the last one is generalization. Now, this is one of the better ones because you literally are just like generalizing things. You're taking things and placeholder and just inputting placeholders. So the example I have here is Elon Musk. So Elon Musk, 52 years old, becomes serial entrepreneur, 50 years old, or 50-ish years old, or you could say middle-aged. It's basically just like I said, detaching the person from the data that you need it so that you can have the necessary information that you have. A serial entrepreneur, 50 years old, maybe you're saying billionaire, all that fun stuff, but it would not be attached to Elon Musk themselves. So like Hank Barker, you would not do Hank Barker, you would do entrepreneur 20 years old or 20 around 20 years old, and then you could say thousandaire because I'm not no billionaire nowhere even close. And then that would be how you would be able to still utilize my information without it directly connecting to me. So I just wanted to quickly go over some examples that I had ChatGPT come up with. One of the big ones that I have is anonymization right here. Uh, right off the bat, you'll see that when you're prompting with identifiable information, you're going to be including like Alex Johnson for their email, where they're from, all these things. When for ChatGPT to like actually do its job, it doesn't need all that information. It needs something like, hey, this is from a customer and they're from a large West Coast city. How do we address this problem? Like it does not need all that extra information to potentially exposing your client's information. Also just not worth it for your own self for if that data does get trained on and gets brought up in later conversations where it can come back and haunt you. So that being said, we have a couple other examples of synthesizing, which is just any real data out there. Like, for example, if you're working with a client named Sarah who owns Sarah's boutiques, why would you include that? You don't need to include that. You could say, our client in the floral business, a small retail business owner in the floral business. It's just, at the end of the day, it's just making sure that there's no way that it can come back to haunt you. Because at the end of the day, you might be using AI for all these things that make your life easier, but if you're using it in the wrong way, it's inadvertently making your life harder. So that being said, let's move into safety within the tools themselves. So ChatGPT is going to be one we're going to be covering. It's the one that most are going to be using. Microsoft Copilot as well, I'm going to cover a little bit. And basically when it comes to ChatGPT and comes to all these AI tools, you need to be making sure that you're making the right choice. There are, I would say there's only like 5 like chatbot based tools that are worth using. ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, like there's a couple more, like Perplexity, things like that. With that all being said, you need to make sure you're making the right choice. So ChatGPT is the one that a lot of people choose, and a lot of companies are going with Microsoft Copilot for those data safety measures that they have in place. So you need to be making sure that you're making the right choice. So that being said, let's go jump into ChatGPT and kind of showcase some of the ways that you can keep your data safe when using AI tools. And the first one is the data controls. So let me just move myself over here, make myself a little bit smaller. Okay. So when you are on ChatGPT, let's just open up a new chat. So this will be the same screen you see. You're on ChatGPT. Up in this top right corner, you see your name. You click over here, and then you see settings. You click on the settings. When you're in the settings themselves, there are a couple different options that you can do that can benefit you. So start off at security. When it comes to security, you can right off the bat establish multi-factor authentication. Super huge. If you are somebody that handles a lot of personally identifiable information or just sensitive information in general, I would recommend enabling two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication to keep your login safe, keep all of the data that you are using safe, and you can even log out of all devices as well. So if you think that there's a problem with somebody logging in onto your profile, you can just log everybody out and then change your passcode. Next is the data controls themselves. So see if it'll improve the model for everyone. So if I were to turn this off, it basically says, hey, you are not allowed to train on any of the information that I input. So if you deal with data on a regular that's identifiable or sensitive, all you need to do is come click this button. It's going to save you a ton of stress. Make sure that you are confidently using the tools. So we're going to click on that in a little bit, but turn that off. You can manage shared links. You can export the data that you have used, and you can delete your account here. Next, the other big one is personalization. So if you don't want ChatGPT to be remembering things about you, remembering maybe some identifiable information and like sensitive data, you can turn off memory. And what memory does is it just basically tries to remember tidbits about you to bring up later to utilize for you later in later conversations, which is beneficial. But a lot of things that it tries to remember, it's like, hey, I'm creating a post on like data safety and AI. It'll remember that for whatever reason, and then it'll like bring it back up and be like, hey, how did that post go? So like it's the beginnings of something good, but it's not great right now. Anyways, besides that, you can delete your chats as well. And another big one that you can do, and this is for if you want to keep that make the AI better for everyone on, but you still want to have that privacy, you go up to here where you see the ChatGPT 4.0. Click on it, and then all the way down here you see temporary chat. Now, when you enable temporary chat, this chat's not going to be appear. You can read it right here. This chat won't appear in history, use or create memories, or be used to train our models. For safety purposes, they will keep it up for 30 days, but they're not going to train on it. Now, the biggest use case for these temporary chats are, like I said, let's say you regularly don't deal with much personal data or sensitive data, but now you do. For this one client that you have to deal with that. With that being said, this is when you can enable a temporary chat and then type away and have you use ChatGPT to get some good results. The one thing I will say though is that just as like the name is, it's temporary, so it will delete. I'm not sure if it deletes right away. I'm pretty sure it's like if you exit off and come back to it, it will be deleted. So be really careful about that. If you like built up and had like pages upon pages upon pages of information in there, and then you click off and come back and it's gone, you might be a little upset. So this is why I recommend for like quick, easy things. But if you're going to be like trying to have like a multi-day conversation or like kind of like a project, I would not be using temporary chats. I would just turn off the model training. So let's jump back into it. I know we covered a couple different things, so this is going to be kind of quick to go into the next section. Let me see where we're at. Safety the tools themselves. Okay. So yep, turned off memory, data retention. We did all that fun stuff. Now let's cover the last thing, which is just going to be best tips and practices, because there's a lot more tips I want to cover, and they're more generalized tips. Like I said, I'm not an expert in data safety or data privacy, but I know a good bit because I've helped people implement AI into their workplaces, and these are one of the things we always are excited, and they are excited to learn about. So one is research every tool you use. I know I touched on this earlier, but when it comes to these AI tools, make sure that you are making the right choice. So for example, let's actually hop back into ChatGPT. Let's have it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Make myself smaller. Oh my goodness, my computer's freezing. Okay, there we go. Okay. So in ChatGPT itself, let's say I'm going to go up in here. I'm going to go to my settings, personalization. Let's just go learn. So if you want to learn more about like how ChatGPT trains and how it's using your data that you're inputting, you can go into memory and then click learn more. Okay, so then once you get on to learn more on like OpenAI's help, you can go to all collections and then privacy and privacy and data policies. When you click here, now you can get access to all the information you would ever want to know on basically how ChatGPT uses your data, which is super, super important to recognize. And this is also the same thing for Copilot. So let me hop into Copilot real quick and I'll show you. Okay, same thing. Now we're into Copilot. A lot of people are going to be using this, especially if you are using AI at work. A lot of people are satisfied with Copilot. So right on the side, so here's your main screen. Right over here, you click on this button, settings, and then you go to privacy, and then boom, here we go. All the things that you would need to know, their privacy statement, how we collect data, what we collect, all of that fun stuff. So this is something that I would recommend you do. If you are a company looking to use AI tools, should be your first stop. You should be jumping straight into their privacy statements, their hows, their whys, just so you have an idea of who they are as a company and what type of tool you're getting yourself into. Okay, with that being said, you also want to never assume that your data is safe. Even with all of these privacy statements and everything that these AI tools and AI companies claim, you still want to have that degree of uncertainty no matter what. So like for example, ChatGPT, they have a Teams plan that, they're not going to train any of that information. Microsoft, same thing. But you still want to take the precautions. You still want to anonymize that data. You still want to assume that your data is not safe, because it could come down the line that, hey, they said they haven't been training, but they have been, and you can just never know, and you always want to be safe with it. So anytime you're using a tool and anytime you have the opportunity to anonymize something to making sure that there's no chance for it to get out there, I would do so. And the next, I know I touched on it, enable two-factor. I haven't had any people trying to log into my ChatGPT yet that I know of, but I would also recommend, hey, logging out of your ChatGPT on at least a bi-weekly or bi-monthly, every couple months, logging out of your ChatGPT, changing your password up a little bit, just to make sure that there is nobody getting access to all that sensitive information out there. The next is practice data minimization. So data minimization is basically saying, hey, I only need this much data, not anymore. There's a data overabundance out there. If you're looking into like a individual, there's pages upon pages of information out there, companies, all that fun stuff. So there's so much data out there, but you only need so much of it to get that task done that you're working on. Just keep it as minimalized as possible. One, to just make sure you're not overcomplicating things, and then two, to save yourself from potentially overusing the data and like getting it out there and leaking information. And then lastly, educate every single person involved with the process of using data, of using AI tools. Everyone should know how to, one, prompt properly and use those techniques I talked about, and they should be able to just know the basics of data safety. They should know to not be inputting sensitive information. They should know that, hey, when you're using AI tools, not everything is safe. Not everyone is saying and sticking to what they actually said they're going to do. OpenAI, for example, you wouldn't want to fully trust them. You want to always have a degree of uncertainty. So with that being said, I do have a couple different little things I put together. When it comes to data safety with AI tools, you have a couple different things you want to cover. You want to make sure that there's privacy involved. You want to make sure there's confidentiality and there's compliance. So compliance with the data safety protocols that you should have in place. If you do not, you should be consulting with a data safety professional. Confidentiality. And when I say confidentiality, I mean making sure that the tools you're using only have enough information to be able to do the things that they need to do. On top of that, just making sure that you're keeping things confidential. You're not putting things into these tools that don't need to be out there. And company data, big one. When it comes to the company data, you need to have access control in place. If you're a small company, it might not be as big of a deal, but you should still, only certain people should have access to certain parts of your data. You shouldn't have the intern that wants to use ChatGPT have access to all the company's private information. That just simply does not correlate. And then it also comes into data encryption. Encrypting, it could be as simple as, instead of saying Hank Barker, you're encrypting it and changing it to like letters or numbers that equal this person. Let's say like I'm C3PO. My other buddy's C3P5, C3PB or whatever. And basically that just makes it so that, hey, I know who this person is. I do, but the AI does not need to. And then personally identifiable information. Limit exposure, keep things as minimized as possible, and anonymize any information that you can. And then lastly, this is just like a big overview of what this would kind of look like. You got data safety with the AI tools, you have personal data, limit exposure, anonymized information. You see it all. You see it all. You get it all. At the end of the day, just make sure you're being safe about how you use these tools. Make sure you aren't putting any information out there that shouldn't be out there. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks.